Call to order of a work session of Goodyear City Council, May 12, 2008. All items listed are for discussion only, and no action can or will be taken. All council members are in attendance. We do have only one item on our agenda. It's the representatives of Langford and Associates will give a presentation on their Goodyear City Center development proposal. And Brett Buckingham, are you going to lead it off? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council. We first need to acknowledge two individuals who are here with us this evening. Wanted to note that we do have Scott Ruby and also David Scholl with us, who are graciously being on our city center negotiation team, and we appreciate that they're being with us today. We appreciate the expertise that they bring to this project. We are very excited to have the Langford Associates development team with us here today. The development team is here to introduce their team experience and also to tell you about their key team members. They will present their design concept for the city center and also accept council feedback. And with that, I will invite Eric Judson to come forward.
Thank you, Brett, very much. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Eric Judson. I'm with JMI Sports. You've seen me many times before talking about baseball. Tonight we're not going to talk about baseball. We're going to talk about a project that in fact might even be more important to the city going forward. And I will tell you that when I first came to Goodyear years ago, it was really the vision that you had for this city hall, this civic center, that captivated me. And in fact, I've been telling my friends for so long what a great opportunity this community is providing for their people, for their citizens, and the importance that you place on your citizens is astounding, and it's to be commended. Certainly we're seeing it with the rapid development around town with a number of great projects, baseball being one of them, but this again I think is going to be the core of your community. This is going to be your gathering place for decades to come, and one that I think that this council and those who follow you will be very proud of. We are going to talk about a number of things tonight and present what we believe is a great conceptual plan. But we are, in fact, responding to an RFP from HDR and your city team. So you're going to see our work to that effect. But we are very interested, and as Brett said, we are here tonight to receive your feedback, to get your input. This is where the discussion starts, and we're very interested in seeing how you believe we should take this going forward. So we're very pleased to be here. We have a tremendous team. I think I was just joking with the group that per capita we've got a larger team than any other project in the country. And if all of our team could raise their hands for a second over here as well. And many others are not even with us tonight. So we've got tremendous resources that we're going to be dedicating to this project, and very excited to be presented to you tonight. I'm going to come back in a moment and talk more specifically about the implementation team, but now I'd like to turn it over to a good friend and terrific developer, Rob Langford.
Thank you, Eric. Mayor, Council, my name's Rob Langford, Langford & Associates, and we, too, are very pleased to be here. When Eric discussed with me and Gordon Carrier, some of the possibilities that this might present, we were immediately excited about it. And of course, working with Eric and his crew has been a very so far very successful. Now we'll just carry it to the finish line, we hope. And speaking of the team, it's 4 members. My company, Langford & Associates, Inc., is the managing member of an LLC that we will form to develop the project. Carrier Johnson is the architect as well as a member of the ownership team. Tonight, Gordon Carrier, who made a wonderful presentation to your selection committee, is not here because he is being given tonight the one of the prestigious College of Fellows award by the AIA in New York City. So Andrew Malaiko will be here and presenting, as well as Mark Johnson of Civitas, the landscape architect and urbanist on our team. Obviously, you know Eric Judson of JMI Sports. From my company, Mary Pam Poo, our executive vice president, who will be the project executive for the project as we move forward. Phelps Development and Hensel Phelps is here kind of in force. Harmon Anderson with Phelps Development is the member of our team, and his folks with Hensel Phelps are right behind him. We want to, I can find the right button here. What we want to talk about tonight is, and these are our presentation objectives, if you will, the team experience. I will go into that after Eric talks about the key team members. We'll go into project examples of how our company, with Carrier Johnson and with Hensel Phelps over the years, have developed a series of mixed-use, retail, residential types of projects and office projects that are quite similar in scope to what we envision at Goodyear Civic Center. Mark Johnson and Andrew will then go through the design concepts. And again, the design concepts, as Eric said, were in response to an RFP that your staff pulled together. They asked us to respond to HDR's kind of overall concept, but they also said, if you want to talk about alternative ideas, please feel free to do so. So what we will be talking about, my associates will be talking about, are two site plans. The base plan, which does respond to HDR's main concepts, and an alternative plan, which we think is pretty exciting, which we like to go through with you at the right time. We will then talk about a comparison of the two plans, both kind of physically and economically. And then at the end, we would solicit, as Eric said, your input, questions, comments, direction, and please feel free anytime during the presentation to ask any questions you'd like, and then there'll be plenty of time at the end to follow up with additional questions. With that, I'm going to ask Eric to come back up, and we'll talk about the key team members.
Thank you, Rob. Rob introduced some of the team members, the organizations, and we clearly have a world-class development, construction, design team collaboration here. But what's very important to you, I know very well, is when it comes down to implementing the project, who are the people you'll be dealing with day to day? So even though they might be great companies, if you're not getting the attention that you deserve, I would suggest that you would not be getting the A team. What you're seeing tonight from the group presenting is a collaboration of principals. So Rob Langford will be very involved. I'll be very involved. Eric Wilson is not here tonight. He is in Berlin, in fact, wrapping up a significant project, building an embassy there. But he will be involved. We have the best and brightest of our team working on this as well. So you're going to get the attention that you deserve on this project. Looking at the slide before you, again, you can see myself, JMI Sports, Eric Judson is the principal there, Rob Langford and Eric Wilson, Mary Pampu, who Rob just introduced as our project executive. She will be the day-to-day person managing this project on our behalf. Now, I did not practice moving these. Let's see if I can add these things. There we go. Okay, terrific. The rest of the implementation team. Casey Rank, you know Casey very well, a member of our team at JMI Sports. She's got over 17 years of development experience. She's gathered great insight and information in working with the city. She is part of our team. Kevin Haley, another member of the JMI Sports team, with over 29 years of development experience and over $2 billion of assets he has worked on. Harmon Anderson, who is here tonight, 24 years with Phelps, over $1.7 billion and 37 projects that he's worked on. Eric Smith, construction management, 11 years of experience, 5 with Langford & Associates. We have Chris Egan, a new member of the JMI Sports team, working out here and on site on the ballpark project now, would also be providing insight. And then very importantly, and Rob wanted to make sure that I focused on this, this is also about asset management. It's not just design and construction, which we're going to talk about mostly tonight, but it's about how, once you come up with a great City Hall plan, as we move into the private development phase, and we're going to talk about the building and phasing of those projects as well, we need great asset management, marketing, sales, promotion. We need to bring people to this community to build those private buildings. So Rob Langford and his team, and Ed in particular, has a great deal of experience in doing that. So again, you are getting a world-class team. We're not going to I didn't have on here on the chart the design team, but Mark Johnson tonight, as you'll see, is a terrific professional with great experience in developing great places. Gordon Carrier, who did make the presentation to the selection committee, someone with many, many years of experience, and their firm is in fact doing great things around this country as well. So our team is world class, and you're going to get the attention you deserve in making sure it's implemented very well.
Okay, thank you, Eric. What I'm going to, I think just to emphasize again what Eric finished with is the asset management. I mean, our company has built its reputation and record on a substantial number of private sector projects where we own, finance, manage, and hold, as well as public-private projects, which we're talking to you about tonight, City Hall and Library and the multi-gen project. But the private sector opportunities of Goodyear City Center to us are pretty exciting. They're very exciting. That's the reason, one of the big reasons we're so enthused about this project is the combination of the commitments the city is going to make to its City Hall, to its library, to its multi-gen center, and eventually to the Performing Arts Center, will create such a significant amount of infrastructure and concept and the site planning and the landscaping and the road networks and et cetera. We're going to create a great place for private sector office, residential retail, and that's not only what we do and do well, but it's also a substantial economic generator to the city. What I'm going to now go through is a series of projects that our team, in many cases our team that you're seeing tonight have worked on together, but in some cases individual projects that team members have done. Starting with the Hall of Justice in San Diego, competitive public process of selecting a developer to combine all the district attorney offices in the city of San Diego and 16 superior courts into one building. And again, it was quite competitive. We ended up being selected, and Carrier Johnson was the architect and Hensel Phelps was our contractor. So that's the first example of where this team has worked together. The Broadway 655 project, a fairly new, just recently opened first high-rise built in San Diego in the last 16 years. There's been one open since, but when we opened Broadway, that was the first. Very successful in leasing. Again, Carrier Johnson designed this project with us. It was recently recorded as one of the highest valued projects, matter of fact, the highest valued project in San Diego when it was recapitalized in the middle of last year. Reno Riverfront project, a project master planned by Carrier right along the riverfront in Reno. It shows the kind of projects that Carrier is capable of doing. In their own rights, and that's a project that we'll anticipate starting in 2009. Columbus, Ohio, a subsidiary of Carrier did a major design for a mixed-use project, including retail, hotel, and cinema projects in Columbus, Ohio. This is a project, the USD Shiley Science Center has been built on the USD campus. Again, an example of the kind of work that Carrier has done, the variety of work that Carrier has done. The Kilroy Office Center in San Diego shows you the kind of projects Carrier does in more of a suburban office environment. The Gallo Arts Center, Modesto, California, designed by Carrier, the kind of, again, experience in arts and performing arts types of projects that Carrier is experienced in. Studio 15, a project under construction now in San Diego, an affordable housing project that they worked closely with the city and the redevelopment agency. Park Place Condominiums in Portland, constructed project designed by Carrier. The Caltrans District 11 headquarters in San Diego, that's again a constructed project that's won substantial acclaim as a public building. Here's a library project in San Diego and San Jose that Carrier designed and Hensel Phelps constructed, finished in 2003. Phelps, for their own right, does development projects as well as construction. Here is the Austin Civic Center and Public Plaza project in Austin. Won a LEED Gold rating. Example of a city center project. Wellington Webb Center in Denver. The same kind of a project, a public project managed, developed, and constructed by Hansel Phelps. Chula Vista, south of San Diego, police headquarters, project designed by Carrier Johnson, and it was completed about 5 years ago, I believe. Chula Vista City Hall, example of their City Hall work. Here's a project that my company developed, Smart Corner in downtown San Diego, recently completed. This project involved working with 5 different agencies. The smaller of the 2 buildings you see there is now the home of the San Diego Housing Commission. This was a very, very intricate project that involved moving a trolley. The trolley, downtown San Diego trolley, went around the corner, but when we took possession of the 60,000-foot block, we went 4 stories below grade, built a parking, and then we built those 2 buildings you see, and then we rerouted the trolley to run diagonally right through the middle of the project. So it was a very successful project. The condominium market has slowed down a bit, but we're doing just fine. And the city is very, very pleased with that. The Hilton Convention Center Hotel is nearing completion. It's a project being constructed by Hansel Phelps Construction Company. Here's a project that we are in the development phase of called Lane Field, and right on the waterfront in downtown San Diego. This is an extremely competitive project that the Port of San Diego went through quite a disciplined process in selecting a developer. My company is a co-developer with two of my associates in San Diego. It's 800 hotel rooms and about 90,000 square feet of retail. We anticipate beginning construction early next year. Petco Park, JMI Sports and Eric Judson led this project. Probably one of the most important projects built in the last decade or so, maybe even more than that in San Diego. Very, very much of a stimulus to East Village and the entire downtown area. This is a project that we built for the University of California Office of the President. Hansel Phelps was our contractor and development partner. This was a creatively financed project in that we used tax-exempt financing to construct the building and then sold it to the university, sold the building to the university, and sold the parking, or at least part of the parking, to the city of Oakland. So it's an extremely complicated project, but in this case we showed our somewhat financing creativity by using tax-exempt financing during construction where we actually own the project. And we worked that out such that we ended up with a kind of a net interest cost of very, very essentially nothing in terms of net interest at the end of the day. And again, the university and the city are very pleased with this project. Yuma Government Complex, Carrier Johnson designed it. My company developed it. Hansel Phelps built it. This was kind of phase 1 of and kind of the southern anchor of an extensive riverfront development that the city of Yuma engaged us to work with them on, and we continue to work with them on the riverfront portions. This was a project that they needed as phase 1, and we completed this in 2001, I believe. And we continue to work with the city of Yuma on residential, conference center, and potentially more office along the city, along the riverfront of the city. So what I wanted to try to do there, and again, ask any questions you'd like, is explain that our team has got the expertise not only in public-private work with you folks for your facilities, but substantial amount of work together as a team on the private sector portions of what we see as the Goodyear City Center. We'll now turn to Mark Johnson of Civitas, and he will begin the process of going through both the base plan and the alternative plan that we presented as a response to the RFP.
Thank you, Rob. Mr. Mayor, members of council, it's wonderful to be here. We're very excited about this project. And I have Andrew Mikhailenko with me from Carrier Johnson. We'll walk you through the design concepts that we have proposed. Whenever we begin is it this button? Let's see, yes. Whenever we begin a new project, we're really heartened when we see a great master plan such as you have put together for this. And we know you've worked on it a long time. Of course, taking a master plan to the next level presents a new set of challenges, because now you have to try and make things real. It's one thing to push a pencil around on paper, and it's another thing to make it come true. And so you'll see in a couple of areas we may have misinterpreted or misunderstood, and we'll point out where those are, just so we're clear. But we're tremendously excited and think the opportunity is great. Here is a footprint. What you're looking at, and I have a number of steps in this presentation. Andrew is the architect, and so we'll do this together. And if you have questions, we'll both try to answer them. So you see the footprints here, and if I push this button, we certainly are respecting the 200-foot diameter radius at the corner of Estrella and Yuma, as in your master plan, to kind of complete that circle at that important intersection, and the prominent view to the White Take Mountains, which we agree is tremendously important. And one thing that has gone back and forth, we understand, we were under the understanding when we did the proposal for the competition that the corner at Goodyear Boulevard and would be squared off, as you see in the big plan. And it turns out it's going to be rounded off. So we just letting you know, we understand that we can adjust. It's not a big deal to us. We just wanted to make sure and acknowledge that we were aware that was changing. Then here you see access to the site from Estrella and Yuma, the primary access points for the public. Those are two-way avenues, creating a prominent civic view to City Hall, which is where the arrowhead is in this picture. And then what I'll refer to as the loop road that goes around the Civic Park. And right here I might mention, well, I think one of the brilliant things in this plan is, in your master plan, is that you're actually trying to create a place. So many communities think one building at a time and fail to add up to create a place that's really civic and prominent for the community. And that we happen to think is a critical piece. Then you see here access into parking from the west. And now this describes the uses around the property, and I'll start with City Hall, which is the building centered on the left, and then the building with the point on it immediately above or north of that is the proposed library. The yellowish or ochre-colored building to the right of that with the other point is the multi-generational center. Then the Performing Arts Center on the right in a kind of brown or rust color. Then on the corner of Estrella and Yuma, you have two office buildings with parking structures that are flanked with retail. The office buildings also have retail on the ground floor, so you have a retail activity center on that corner, retaining the circle on the corner and the views, as we mentioned. And then continuing around to the southwest corner, we have office, residential, and retail on the ground floor with the city parking structure shown there in gray.
Pardon me for just a minute.
Please.
How many lanes, excuse me, how many lanes have you provided for traffic?
On the inner?
The inner loop road? The inner loop road has 2 lanes, and it's a one-way traffic in the counterclockwise direction.
Okay.
Now, this is indicating that we agree and think it's tremendously important, very exciting that it appears, my understanding is you have a university coming on campus to the north, that there be a spatial connection, a green space connection from the Civic Park to the campus, but that there also be this view corridor that moves through so that you see this visual connection as well. And now moving on to the beginnings of architecture, and I emphasize the beginnings of architecture because remember, we haven't really worked with you yet. We don't know what your tastes and ideas are. So we've put something forward. And what I would call attention to here in the upper right is a City Hall. On the left is the library, and on the right, the multi-generational center. Our idea is that these should be a family of related buildings with related materials and related volumes of space and a similarity in their heights and mass and so on, with City Hall being the most prominent for, I think, obvious reasons. But they should have some individual identity. We're not trying to make a campus where everything is identical, which frankly can be beautiful, but people get lost when everything is the same. So just think of the notion of a family of architecture which is yet to be developed. Then talking about access, First of all, from the Civic Center, we see in these three blue arrows are pointing directly to the front doors of City Hall, the library, and the multi-generational center. So there's a strong connection of the civic place to each of those buildings. With the visual access that I've mentioned before from Estrella, and then vehicular access into garages in the final phase plan as you see here. So you see on the western side along Goodyear Boulevard, the library, City Hall, and City Garage, 3 linked garages with 2 primary access points. And then you can see the location of other garages around the site. This, of course, would only take place as the site is built out, because we wouldn't want to be building parking garages before they're really needed. This is the beginnings of a concept for a landscape for this civic place and the entire complex. I think I'd start by pointing out that we think the idea of the arroyo as a pedestrian way is tremendously important. One of the beauties of your master plan is how interconnected it is at many levels. Interconnected for people, for bikes, for cars, for buses. And place to place, you make these connections, and the arroyo is critical to that. As the arroyo enters the civic park, it's part of there's a shade structure that we had in mind that might have water or mist associated with it for shade and cooling, be a place to sit. On the west of that, a grove of trees that would provide even more shade, and on the southeast of that, a more large open area. The idea here is, and we don't know if we have the design right, that's something we'll work with you on, but the notion is there need to be several scales of space. There need to be spaces for large gatherings, there need to be spaces for small gatherings. It has to work for the biggest events you might wish to hold, but it also has to be a great place every day, and if it's not, we've failed. And then you can see that we envision that the streets are planted as green streets with plenty of shade and wide sidewalks and a pedestrian emphasis. And here are just a couple of renderings that we put together of what it might feel like to be in this civic park. Again, just a proposition, not really a design per se. Sometimes the young kids in our office that draw these drawings get really excited about nifty ideas, and we have to reel them back in. But here you see this plaza of the arroyo under a shade structure on the bottom. We had an idea that perhaps there could be a cafe or a pavilion within the park, and that's that kind of glassy thing that you see in the upper area, but giving a sense of scale and shade. Then City Hall itself, we'll talk about the basic concept. We think it's tremendously important that in a City Hall, people basically come to a City Hall for 2 reasons. They come to meetings like this, or they come because they need something. They need a permit, or they need information, or they want to know about zoning, or how to get a permit for a park, or something of that nature. So the notion here, and this picture is just one idea of having a space where you have concierge-style service, where you come to a desk. The desk might say Parks Department or Public Works or something like that. And there's a person there who's waiting to help you and direct you as to how to get the information you need. This area obviously needs to feel light and have a sense of space and a good place to sit. Sometimes you have to wait a little while things happen, so comfort's essential. Then the lobby of the building itself, we think, should have probably a double-story height, be spacious. In the rear of this picture, you see an information desk, and you see a couple of sitting areas. In the current thought here, chambers are in the distant part of the picture. We'll talk about that a little more in a minute. But again, a lot of light coming in, as you can see, with quite a bit of shade also. Because in our climate here, it's very important to think about that.
How much space are you allowing for the lobby area?
Do you know how big the lobby is?
I don't recall the exact area of the lobby offhand, but it was designed to meet the program requirements that HDR had put together, and I want to say that was approximately 4,000 or 5,000 square feet.
Now we'd like to talk about chambers a little bit. Council chambers are a special type of room. The proposal here is that perhaps it could have the form of kind of an oval. Circular forms kind of have a sense of community and often work very well for gathering spaces like this. And yet I'm going to actually pose a question to you right now. You can see here as you enter the front door, you go right and you enter chambers. But you can also see that the chambers is somewhat poked out of the corner of the building. And there are a couple reasons for that. One is that it's generally more efficient and cost-effective because if the chamber has a high volume of space, perhaps a sloping floor and a sloping ceiling, a skylight to let a lot of light in, well, it's not always that efficient to put the rest of the building on top of it because you wouldn't want columns coming down You wouldn't want your council chamber to look like Fenway Park, since we're here talking about baseball, where there's a column for every seat, by my estimation.
Fenway's Red Sox.
I just thought if you'd like to talk about it now, we'd be interested in your thoughts as to what extent it makes sense to provide this sort of visible identity for chambers, because it becomes an icon or a symbol of the building when you do this. But it can be pulled back in, and if you wanted to discuss that, we'd be happy to hear what you have to say. Yes, sir.
I'd like just to ask, have you taken in consideration the security of this particular room? Because I see the only doors, are these on the outside? Is that on both sides of this? Are there other doors?
Let me just briefly address the security issue. The intent is that the council chambers would always be entered coming through the lobby. So moving through the center of the building, which is shown in the light yellow, where the red dashed arrow is, one would proceed through the lobby and move through a security screening before entering the council chambers. Once within the council chambers, there is an opportunity for an outdoor break area for recess, which is shown in the light lavender area just to the south of the bold yellow circular portion of the council chambers. That is intended to be an outdoor secure area where chambers could recess for a period of time, or individuals attending could recess to the exterior for a few moments. The other doors that you see on the council chambers are egress doors that are there for fire and life safety purposes. And those are the ones you see that are exiting directly to the exterior. So I don't know. Let me know if I've answered your question.
Well, I'm not sure I know which ones you're talking about. We'll come to that later. What I wanted to know is if you had addressed the security issue, and obviously you say you have. So.
We believe we have, but we certainly need to continue that dialogue with you as we design the building.
Okay.
And one of the things that's become obvious in today's world is we can't always predict the future of security, and so it's important to have some options. So, yes, sir.
We're a growing community, as you know. What is the seating capacity of the chamber?
Do we remember? It's what's in the program, but neither of us remember. Gordon would, but unfortunately he's not here.
Yeah, he's always the number guy.
Sorry.
Well, okay. You will get back to us then with the figure.
Oh, so we can get that number, absolutely. Any thoughts on the level of how symbolic this chamber should be?
I like the individuality of it. It's sort of provides a different appearance than the rest of the building. Sort of stands on its own within the building. Mm-hmm. I like that. I think that's important.
I agree. That's a nice design. And you mentioned skylights. I thought that was important too, because a lot of times when you walk into the chamber meetings and we get an opportunity to visit other areas, it's dark.
Yep.
And so you have to either fumble around for the lights, or have a guide get you to the right place, even if you're just doing nothing but looking. Mm-hmm. It's not planned anything. I think it would be great to have the skylights.
Yeah,
so we have to stand alone.
Very often chambers are deeply buried in a building with no windows or anything.
This looks like about 300.
That's a believable number.
Believable.
Yeah.
About 300. Brett says 300.
Brett says 300.
Throw my 2 cents in.
Yes.
I definitely like the set apart from, or attached but set apart from City Hall type idea. A couple of notes, and I'm just saying it because I don't see it. But if I think about cordoning off this area at 5 o'clock, because that's when most of our meetings take place, and that way folks aren't going ingress and egress in and out of City Hall. But public restrooms, I don't see them in your drawing outside of being inside City Hall, and so you might want to contemplate some. I don't see it within that round circular area unless that's the stations that are kind of behind the council chamber or behind the seats that we would sit in.
Vice Mayor, that's a very good comment actually that you're making. The restrooms on that floor are primarily, as you've noted, in the tan color or the taupe, and they're primarily accessed off of the lobby. If you were to secure the lobby and the council chambers, it could operate in that manner. But if you were to try to, just secure just the chambers, we'd have to look at a different option.
Yeah, I think about, when we have meetings at City Hall, you always have to have somebody out front and sitting right up front, and that's another body and another person that's got to watch the door or watch the lobby and that sort of thing. So it's just something that I see it as an inefficiency currently within City Hall when we hold meetings at City Hall. The other thing that I also noted, and this is just from sitting at this vantage point, no exit out the back in the sense of, God forbid there's some event that takes place, but sometimes we end up in confrontational situations, not by our own accord at times, sometimes by our own accord. But if we have to duck out the back door, there's no way to do it when I look here. What's that?
I haven't tried that.
We haven't had to have that happen. But,
Well, we don't.
with the incident that happened in St. Louis, the statistics to me were very alarming of what takes place in local political chambers, and to not see an exit out the back door is a little concerning to me.
So it's a great idea. Easy to accommodate.
Yeah.
Good point.
And then, I assume all the slopes would allow for accessibility and folks with accessible needs to get to and from the chambers. But I like the programming space, and that to me looks like a council chambers that's going to be active 9 to 9 type deal, not just 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. one day a week. That to me looks like a place we could hold work sessions. And as I'm articulating this, I'm going to say it out loud. We tend to do work sessions here. We've tried it down on the floor around a picnic-like, table-like setting, but
It doesn't work.
it doesn't work in this chambers. But it would be nice to have a little bit less formal setting for work sessions, that there's still an audience component to, where we're not necessarily sitting side by side, but we're facing each other. That changes the dynamic of our meetings drastically. It ends up being much more of a work dialogue type of a meeting versus action-oriented meeting.
So are you saying the space is in front of those
Yeah,
seats?
kind of where the arrow is. It looks like where the lectern would be. If there's the ability to have a table there, or some component that it's easy, that moves in and out, or pops up.
Many new and really good council. Once upon a time, council chambers were designed like courtrooms, and
That's
and
what this is. That's what
you
we're
know,
in.
it's
This is our courtroom too.
not very friendly environment sometimes. And lots of new council chambers have what I'll just call a staff or a presenter's table in this area here, which can be set up to also be a conference table and can be large enough. And it makes a lot of sense, because people who are presenting to you have papers. They don't always need to come to the microphone. There can be mics there, et cetera. So it's a multi-purpose function.
And then just as your program, you're looking at it right there, but as you're programming the space, if we've got partners that are existing within City Hall, we might want to talk. If we're talking 300 seats, 400 seats, I could see this serving maybe as, we lease it out for a fee during the day for graduations short term until we're built up for the two universities, or for smaller type events. So maybe think about the flexibility of the hardscape of the room, being able to move around a little bit to accommodate that kind of activity.
What you're looking at here then is just the first idea of what those chambers might look like, and we think there's just three things to consider in addition to the idea you can see it's fully accessible. One is that it should be spacious, and there's an appropriate amount of space. It shouldn't be palatial, but it should have a nice feeling, a nice high ceiling. It should be light, and the source of light here are the skylights, which are above and behind where the picture is taken from. And then we think it should be warm. And so we've represented this rendering the idea that it should have a fair amount of wood or other warm materials. Comfortable chairs.
Comfortable chair. You saying you're not comfortable in here?
So no pews in the council chambers.
Is there thought given to more than just the city seal behind? I've walked into some chambers that, if we're talking about arts, we're all pretty well committed to the arts, but can we commission something behind that? That's a blank space, a canvas.
We have not.
Something electronically that you can change the pictures.
That can be done.
Why not do
just
something that we
different,
can
just
vary the
something
pictures behind there? I don't know what you call it, or whatever the technical name is. Yeah. You can change that picture.
Where do you anticipate that these folks over here are going to sit in the chamber?
Let me go back to the plan. I think, now remember, we have to work together on this plan so that everybody is satisfied with it, but Andrew, I assume that's on the sides?
It's on the side.
On the sides of the dais, but in this position, but in this plan, a little bit further away, more towards the audience.
Somewhere in there.
We'll move on to the library, if that's all right. Here you see the library highlighted in the northwest corner. And what really defines the library for us is today libraries are a different kind of space than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, you go in, kept your mouth shut, put your head down, and found a little dark place and read a book. And now they're public gathering places, and the idea of a great reading room has emerged, and a lot of accessibility and intervisibility has become very important to libraries because they are so multifunctional. And so all we're representing here is that these need to be airy, open spaces with a lot of north light, so the light's appropriate for reading and comfortable. And I like to point out there will be furniture in the library. This is drawn as if there's nowhere to sit, and it's simply a rendering to give you an idea.
I think that one of the things was important, because it'll be some time before we build a museum, that we do have wall spaces, that we are able to have art exhibits, and so we can use this in a...
That's a terrific
transition.
idea. Terrific idea. Many libraries act as galleries in a certain way, yeah.
Yeah, because we have a historical society, and we have a lot of historical material, both the city, Goodyear, and this historical society we have here, both have a lot of materials. And it'd be nice to have a place in the library or in one of these buildings where that can all be placed, because the entire history of Goodyear, practically from the turn of the century up to the present day,
Terrific.
is,
Terrific idea.
got a lot of stuff.
Yes.
To piggyback on Frank a little bit, that was something that I had been thinking about, was museums and how we could connect that within the city center, not only with Goodyear history, but with Luke Air Force Base and baseball and farming. There's many aspects that we could add to it, and if there's a way to, even within the library, have an empty wing that will be for those areas until that is something that we can build. I think that it needs a museum, or that type of history needs to be in the center of where most of our people are going to be going, and so please keep that in mind. Thank you.
I do like your concept of architectural concept of taking a different design for the library, different design for performing arts. You're absolutely right. People do get lost when you have a similarity of architecture in buildings. Peoria is a prime example of that. I get lost in that campus every time I go up there because their buildings are basically the same. They appear the same anyway to me. But that's a good concept.
Let's go to the multi-gen, and it's in this location. And similar to the library, we see it as having a lot of light and being open. We think intervisibility is especially important in this building, so the idea we're proposing here, for example, is a running track and a balcony above the gym, large lobby spaces, and high volume spaces, so it feels very open, very friendly.
Now, this is including some separate rooms in this, because we have a number of...
Yes,
Okay,
there's,
just want to make sure.
we've met the full program.
All right,
It's
great.
it's not just a gym.
Okay.
And then I'm going to let Andrew talk a little bit about the phasing of this.
Okay, I'm going to walk you through the phasing of the base plan, and strategically point out to you as I go along as to the key decisions that have been made. And you'll notice a theme as we go through these. These decisions have been made to be able to keep the City Hall and the city's uses in the limelight throughout the duration of the phase construction, as well as to be able to develop the retail and the office spaces in locations that appear to be the most marketable and create the most synergy for you in creating active outdoor locations and plazas, etc. So in the first phase, what you're looking at now on the screen, north is up, the primary objective of the first phase is to build the City Hall and the library. Those are located on the west side and sit prominently on the park. From the front door of the City Hall, rolling out across the park and across the loop road, the Main Street Loop Road, is the east-west Civic View Corridor that forms from Estrella as per the request of the master plan. And then to the north of that, you have the library. The City Hall and the library are parked in the two flanking parking lots. They're surface parking lots. They're located to the north and to the south side of what I call the front lawn that rolls out from the City Hall, and are illustrated in the orange with yellow stripes. And those are interim basis parking facilities, so that you don't have to absorb the cost initially of building a parking structure right out the starting gate. On the far southeast corner of the site plan, you'll see a purple building. That is the first of a 4-story office building, private office building. It has a retail activated base and starts to anchor the intersection of Human and Australia.
So the orange is the parking, temporary parking at least.
Orange is interim temporary service parking.
Thank you.
And in this slide, you will see that there's a further definition on the surface parking.
Understand.
The surface parking, anytime it's a new construction, is orange with yellow stripe. Once it's already been in place for at least one phase, it moves to a soft yellow, meaning that's now an existing surface parking lot. The primary objective of the second phase is to create the gateway from Yuma and Estrella, to create the Civic Gateway, if you would, that frames your community and creates the northwest axis across the site, ultimately culminating in a terminus view to the White Tank Mountains. And so that's done by the placement of the second identical twin office building to the first. Phase 3 is entirely civically based. The first move is to place the multi-generational center up at the north. The pairing of the multi-generational center and the library to its southwest form a gateway on the northwest end of the project that opens up a gateway, if you would, you may not even thought about, which is really a gateway that takes you to the campuses. Also in this phase is the delivery of the full build-out of the envisioned community park. And as a result of that, we're displacing the temporary interim parking that was provided previously where the park is being placed in, and we're moving it to the structured parking lot to the south of the City Hall. Phase 4 is focused on bringing opportunity for the Performing Arts Center. And with the land utilization of the Performing Arts Center having previously been used for interim parking, it raises the need for the private office building, the very first one that was built in Phase 1, to now receive its own structured parking. That structured parking is enwrapped in yellow, and that's enwrapped with residential on the upper levels and an activated retail base. And then the proposed final phase. The proposed final phase is focused upon realizing the vision of the original master plan, an intensified mixed use of urban development. And with this scheme, you'll see that we mirror the private parking structure and the residential mixed-use retail component that's wrapping it to the southwest. We enlarge the parking garage that's for City Hall to its maximum build-out requested, and we also provide a wrap on that of residential and retail at its base that lines the inner walkway of the Arroyo. Onto the opposite flanking side of the Arroyo, you have a 150-foot tall, 12-story private office building that completely parks within itself, and this would be the final phase building. And this is entirely complementary with the original vision for the master plan, and allows for the opportunity to bring in Class A office into an environment of highly mixed-use 24-hour life.
In this proposal, what is the approximate size of the center, this open grass area, the open
It's exactly as per the original HDR's plan, and I want to say it's like 4.5 acres if I remember its area correctly.
Okay.
Oddly enough, I remember the total area from building face to building face more than I remember the area that's within just the green.
while we're on this slide, I'd like to point out that there's an issue here I'd like you to think about, and we could talk about it right now, but we're going to show you also another possible scheme. And this issue that I'm going to raise differentiates these two schemes. The master plan centers everything around the park. So the address of every building is on the park. And City Hall is given the most prominent address. And then the master plan allows the private building to the south of it, as you can see here, which is larger than City Hall, to be larger because it's in a secondary position within the master plan.
That's the purple.
The purple building, yes. And so that's one way to do it. But this master plan does move City Hall deeply into the site and allows this building to be quite a bit larger and to some eyes in front or very close to City Hall. And so there's a question of the priority or the balance between just the scale of those buildings and how everything is perceived. Now, don't forget that, yes, sir.
Go ahead, no.
As an urban designer, we want to focus heavily on what the first couple of floors of the buildings are like all the way around and how the streets are designed, because that's what the pedestrian and the person driving in the loop and in the park tends to see. We don't generally look up at the tops of the buildings. We see more eye level. So these models are maybe a little more severe than the reality. But it's an issue that you'll see in the next scheme is quite different.
Starting with the City Hall, can you go around the entire complex and give me the height of the various buildings? Can you have that?
Approximate.
The City Hall is a 5-story building, and it's going to place it roughly about 60 feet, 65 feet in height. The library is to its north. It's a 1-story building. It has considerable height. At the highest volume, it's nearly 40 feet. The multi-generational center is 2 stories, and because it has some high bay space, it also is a neighborhood around 40 feet.
No, does it drop? Looks like
It lowers down in some areas to a 1-story building, so it would range anywhere from, let's say, 15 to 30 to 40 feet in height.
Okay. Down the corner building.
The Performing Arts Center I won't comment on. I'll walk past the Performing Arts Center. Coming to the south to the yellow buildings that are encasing the parking garages. Those are 4-story parking garages with a 4-story wrap on them. Generally, those would be 10 feet per floor, so 40 feet approximately. The 2 office buildings are both 5-story buildings. They would be in the range of about 60 feet in height. And then likewise a mirrored image for the second parking structure at about 40 feet. And then you have 150 feet as you come around to the tall private office building, the highest of the private office buildings. And then the city's parking for a member right is like a 3.5-story parking structure, so it puts it around 35 to 40 feet.
Well, that's purple building. I thought you said it was 12-story.
It's a 12-story, and it's 150 feet.
150.
May I ask you a question about
Yes.
the City Hall starts when we construct it in, say, 2010 or 2011. It's going to be a satisfy requirement for X number of people. In 20 years, that X is going to have a 5 or something in front of it. But the building isn't changing in height.
Right. Yeah, I'll address that real quick for you. I'll address that for you, Mayor. The response to that is what we have done as a development team is we've made what we believe is probably the best decision for the city, given that the program between 2017, which was what we were asked to respond to in the RFP, and 2027 has approximately 30,000 gross square feet of building growth, that it seemed most economical to build the entire building out today and to effectively shell it and mothball certain areas of the building to be not TI'd, no tenant improvement to them, until a later date when they became necessary for use.
How many square feet was City Hall again?
Yeah, what is square foot?
The building that we've proposed is 238,000 gross square feet.
Okay, well, that's plenty big.
And that actually, as Rob was saying to me, that it meets the requirements of the RFP at 225,000. Actually exceeds it.
If we could go ahead and play the movie, I think there's someone named Eddie who can do that.
Eddie can do those in the back.
Hi, Eddie. We've got a little animation that walks you through this in 3 dimensions so you get a sense of how it feels. And I won't talk too much. We're starting at the corner. We'll move into the site. And this has its own speed, which I can't control. So here you see the massing of the corner and the view corridor to the White Tank Mountains through the park. You get a sense of those heights that you asked about. There's the loop road, and then coming into the park itself. You get the larger open space. You can start to see the shade structure. And then turning here to look at City Hall. So there's the front door of City Hall. And then the Shady Grove part of the park, the library then coming up on the left. And the volume on the left there, that's the reading room. And now we've turned around and we're looking back, library on the right, multi-gen on the left. So you can see how prominent City Hall is. And then we'll approach City Hall directly on the axis. That's the sundial. These models are drawn very accurately, so you get a good sense of the scale of the spaces and the scale of the buildings, etc. Except there's one car that keeps going around in a circle. It's not the last time you'll see it.
Got to keep those cruisers off the street.
The lobby. And then we'll take a walk along the arroyo, which starts when the car drives by.
And runs about where it goes.
He's driving in the UK. It's a one-way street, right?
So here we thought this walkway should be more shady, so it has this almost continuous idea of shade structure. I imagine we could have mist coming out of portions of that for cooling. Again, the idea of cafe, shady places to sit. City Hall on the right. And a car driving in the background. And there you can see chambers very prominently in the building. And then a bird's eye looking at City Hall on the left, you get a sense of the massing of it. See, there's convenient visitor parking right out front. And the multi-generational center with the rust-colored roof. You can see how this is a building, as you asked, with many different volumes to it because there's many different kinds of specialized space.
Is that a swimming pool?
That's the gym there. You see there, the pool on the left. Yeah. Pool is in the enclosed space on the left. The gym is the larger volume. The pool is the slightly smaller one. And there you see the idea for chambers, and you see the skylights rendered in blue.
Great idea.
Okay. Now I'd like to talk about a second idea. The RFP raised the question that allowed us that if we saw a way to provide a better value for the city, we were allowed to propose it. Of course, value means it means different things to different people. Cost is certainly a factor, but other things affect value too. And when you change value, you are going to change the scheme. So if we proceed to this alternate, the alternate begins like this. You see the arroyo coming through in the green squiggle. We've moved City Hall to a forward position nearer the corner of Estrella and Yuma. And respecting the circle, but initially the view would be to City Hall. One of the things that's probably obvious right away is by building City Hall closer to that important corner, we don't have to bring infrastructure and roads so far into the site to get Phase 1 started. It does mean, obviously, that this particular version of City Hall needs to have two doors, one on each side. It has to have two fronts. It can't have a back. And then the view to the mountains is from City Hall and the park on the northwest side, or from the other entry to City Hall. This then clusters buildings around two civic spaces, a space in the foreground we're calling the gateway between the intersection or the corner and City Hall, and then the civic park here. We are showing here in the upper right the L-shaped building is the Performing Arts Center. We do understand that you do have an RFP out that has a specific 5-acre site included, and this scheme can accommodate that site, so that's not a problem. But as we drew it here, we really wanted to emphasize that we felt buildings should surround and wrap the civic park. So that's really all we're illustrating. You would have the library is immediately to the left of the City Hall here. The multi-generational center is in the same location as before. And then you have residential down the west or the left-hand side in the southwest corner.
No, I don't see the library.
I can't point. It's right in the word that says gateway on the left. It's the red building above it.
It says civic uses.
It says civic uses, yes, and that is the library. Now, this scheme, of course, is not developed with as much detail as the other, but here you create the Main Street Road coming through, this welcoming plaza idea, what we've called the living room in the Civic Park. And then here's a landscape plan idea, and I think you can see here, this actually has a little bit more total green space than the other plan. It's a little more compact. One of the things we like about it, in addition to the phasing values, is that you get two scales of space. So I can imagine a press conference, for example, being held in the space on the east side of City Hall and a public event, a large event, on the west side of City Hall. Seems fairly obvious. And this is just a rendering of what that gateway space may look like. That would be City Hall in the background, but much closer to the street than in the other scheme. We've called this space the welcome. And I'll let Andrew talk about the phasing again.
To keep the two schemes as comparable as possible, the phasing is very similar between the two. So you'll see in the first phase, again, the emphasis to place the City Hall and the Regional Public Library into service. The City Hall, as Mark just alluded to, is prominently placed at the intersection of Yuma and Estrella, and rolling from its front door diagonally out to the intersection is its welcome. The first private office building is constructed right at the intersection, and eventually a second one will come into the pairing, which will allow that to become a gateway, a framed gateway to the Civic Center. Let me just step back just one slide and make a...
Up right now, so this is how many stories on the two office buildings again?
Those two office buildings in this scheme are slightly greater in height. They're one floor additional, so these are 5-story office buildings in this case.
Oh, in this case, okay.
5 over retail. I'm going to step back just one slide to make something clear for you about where the parking is. The parking in Phase 1 is surface parking for both the library as well as the City Hall and the private office building shown in the orange hatched area. The two areas flanking either side of the welcome would be the parking dedicated to the City Hall. As is mentioned in Phase 2, the emphasis is to reinforce that gateway from at Estrella and Yuma and to frame the view to the City Hall. As we move to Phase 3, the value is entirely placed again on creation of the civic uses. So the multi-generational center is built in the northwest corner, the completion of the living room, and as we move into Phase 4, we have the parking structure for the City Hall being placed on the lot adjacent to the second private office building. So there is an advantage here. You can defer potentially the construction of the parking structure for City Hall by a little more distance in the scheme than you can in the base.
What are the 4 blue buildings? I know the City Hall is one, and the library is the other one. What is
Correct. The building in the northwest corner is the multi-generational center, and to the right of that is the Performing Arts Center sitting on a 3-acre parcel. And the Performing Arts Center is located adjacent to the park, where it's able to capitalize on the opportunity of indoor-outdoor performances. And as thus, we've shown a outdoor amphitheater relationship to it. And in the final phase, it's about intensifying the mix of uses, and a substantial amount of residential is brought in the yellow block areas with self-contained structured parking. And so we create the final creation here of a true mixed community. Up on the northeast corner, you will see a equivalent 150-foot, 12-story office building, and its parking structure immediately to its north. That parking structure has the capability in the evening hours to be able to handle the parking for the Performing Arts Center.
So if I go back to the issue of the relationship of the private development to City Hall, we have to admit we kind of like this scheme. And one reason we like it is that City Hall is very prominent from day one and remains prominent throughout all phasing. The commercial buildings are at the corner and along Estrella, sort of where they belong, as far as, it seems to me. You create the Civic Center is highly visible from both streets, but it's a precinct surrounding this living room, as we've called it, on the interior, so that it's very cohesive. And then you have private development around the other sides, and so it seemed to sort of zone out in a very logical way to us.
I like the idea of the amphitheater being back in that, so that you're away, performing arts and then the amphitheater being a part of that, so that it's sheltered away from the noise of the street and all that, so it can be used probably at any time, yeah.
Well, it's really nice with performing arts, and again, we know that this is not the site you had before, and we can go back to that.
Just a concept.
But the ability to have people arrive at a performing arts center on one side, but to have performances on the other is terrific because, as you know, everybody gets there about the same time, and they all leave at exactly the same time. And separating those things is usually a good thing to do. Now, Rob, I think you're going to do some comparisons.
Well, Mark and Andrew, thank you. And I really, on behalf of the team, want to thank Carrier and Civitas for doing, I think, a marvelous job of developing not only the base plan but the alternate plan. I think it's pretty exciting. I did want to just put a little bit of kind of facts or maybe statistics to the two different concepts. Let me start off by saying that the public buildings in both schemes are the same, 348,000 feet. Let me also comment that the size of the City Hall is pretty much prescribed by HDR, and it's a 230,000 square foot building which will satisfy city needs for a substantial number of years. We're open to ideas about that, and we believe we've got some ideas that can accommodate a financing plan that might not quite be able to build all of that initially, but still build enough of the real city functions, the council chambers, the lobby entry, the places that need to have public access. We've got some thoughts about that, but we would like some more direction. So what you're looking at is 348,000 feet, including the larger city hall, the library, and the multi-generational building. The private development in the base plan and the alternative plan, it's interestingly enough, it's just about twice as much private development in the alternative plan, and the reason for that is that we have more land to develop privately than we do in the base plan. And the reason for that is shown in the next two categories. As Mark said, there's actually more open space in the alternative plan, but substantially less roadways and sidewalks. That's where we get the ability to use more of that land for private development. And I think that will reflect itself in some economic benefits here in a moment. So I think the concepts, we are very comfortable with the base plan. We're very comfortable with the alternative plan. We do think that there's some real good benefits to the alternative plan, which we'd like to get your feedback on. But we're fine either way. And as to the performing arts site, as Mark said, if that 5 acres that was laid out in the original plan is what's needed, fine. We can certainly do that and put our taller office building behind it and on the park instead of the other way around, as the guys just showed. So we can chat about that. Now let's go to the economics. The $85.1 million for City Hall. That is for the larger 238,000-foot City Hall. That gets you a long number of years out in the future. But that is what the RFP asked us to respond to. The library and the multi-gen facility, we haven't put a number on. We believe the library, however, can be built within the basic parameters that the RFP talked about. The infrastructure. Here's an interesting distinction economically. Phase 1, and I'll show you what Phase 1 infrastructure is here in a minute, but Phase 1 infrastructure in the base plan, which includes that entire loop roadway, and all the parks and plazas and et cetera, is $15.7 million. In the alternative plan, it's $10.3. We just simply aren't building as much roadways and sidewalks.
Oh, okay.
The total infrastructure build out in the base plan is $28.3 million in the base, $24 in the alternative plan. So those are economic pieces that kind of gear into the final figure that we've shown you, which what we've done here is taken the economic benefits that accrete to the city over a 36-year period related to sales tax. These are all private sector benefits the city gets in some form or another. Sales tax, ground lease payments. Our proposal is based on a long-term ground lease. Rental tax, property tax, land sales, because we do have some ideas for condominium project, to some extent, very, very limited, but some condo sales, which we would like to buy the land instead of lease it, and a contracting tax. What we've done is taken both those schemes out over 36 years and present valued the stream of income coming to the city at 5% discount rate, $63.6 million of present value dollars in the base plan, 88.1 in the alternative plan. So again, we're here to discuss and get your feedback and talk about these ideas. We do think that the alternative plan has got some good benefits. The Phase 1 comparison, I alluded to that a moment ago in our comments about the economics. In the base plan, you can see the surface parking, the loop road, the 3 buildings, including the library, City Hall, and our first private office building. You can see kind of visually, you can see the difference in infrastructure costs. In the alternative plan, same thing. We've got the surface parking, the library, City Hall, and the Phase 1 office building. Now, we've taken the liberty of looking at some pros and cons of these plans, and you guys might have some more than we came up with, but and really this is for the benefit of discussion. You know, in the base plan, we certainly see the benefit of that from Estrella and Yuma, the shot to the mountains. That's was important in the HDR plan, important in the RFP. So that we do frame that view all the way from the intersection. In the base plan, the community open space serves as a very substantial civic use focus. The direct access from Estrella to City Hall is an important concept. Base plan addresses that. Visual access to City Center, again from Estrella. Vehicular circulation, because it's kind of, rectangular or square, it's easier to probably understand a bit in terms of how you ingress and egress and find parking. The cons of the base plan: higher infrastructure costs, as I just explained, and a decrease in overall fiscal benefit to the city. The alternative plan. The pros include a Civic Plaza that concentrates the retail on the activated zone. I think that's important to us because, and to you, because the retail, that's a way to enliven the whole Civic City Center, and we want it to be related to the green areas, to the plaza areas, as much as we can. The Central Park and the alternative plan abuts the buildings, library users, office workers, et cetera, in essence, into two different kinds of open spaces that you won't be crossing traffic to get to. And I think that's an important thing. We've got two different kind of park areas. Central Park is reduced by 35,000 square feet, that's the living room part of Central Park, allowing the creation of individualized open spaces for a variety of civic uses. So it's just a little more usable space. It's smaller. We activate the southeast corner with civic uses and retail and office in phase one, and related to that is, in our perspective, we create more of a immediate concentrated infrastructure impact at the corner. So we believe that will give us a kind of a jump start on the visual impact of Goodyear City Center and our success in going forward with private sector developments with City Hall at the corner of Estrella and Human. Lower infrastructure cost and enhanced physical benefit to the city. The cons, as Mark and Andrew pointed out, we do interrupt the view to the White Mountains by City Hall, but on the other side of City Hall, you've got it. So that is a limitation. Limited direct access to City Hall from Estrella Parkway. That's arguable, but I think it's certainly worthy of noting. And the vehicular circulation and wayfinding might not quite be as clearly defined in the alternative plan. So with that, we'd like to go into a kind of a wrap-up and talk about next steps. Again, we're here to react, to discuss, to exchange ideas, to answer any questions you have, i.e. the feedback that we'd like from the council. We are very prepared to proceed into a session that hopefully will result in a memorandum of understanding from your staff and from us that lays out the business plan that we have proposed as negotiated with your staff. We remain confident that if the goal of the city is to be in their building by the end of 2010, we can accomplish that. We all need to move quickly to do that, but we can do that. So, again, I think at this point we'd just like to open it up to any further questions you've got, any feedback that you'd like further discussion on, and of course any questions of any of our team members. Thank you very much for your.
Thank you. Why don't we start on the left, Joanne? We'll just go this way.
Okay. Well, after seeing both your plans, I do kind of prefer the alternate plan. I believe that it gives a little more energy to the site, gives a little more energy of being possibly a 24-hour type of area. I appreciate the residential area next to the multi-gen area. I do appreciate the greenery or the warmth that is being spread out throughout the whole area rather than just in a centralized scope. The library and the multi-gen center, I do like the architecture, especially the library. I believe that having a contemporaneous to it is valid. The City Hall is too stark for me. It's too contemporary for me. It needs some warmth for me. I did like some of your other projects that had, I want to go back to one of them that we did. Well, I don't know if it was the Adobe or maybe it was the one in Texas. Well,
Austin?
Boston. That's it. This one, San Diego. Just having a little more warmth. I'm not this guy. So.
Okay, well, that's good feedback. We
Okay.
appreciate
Okay.
that.
One last thing that I was hoping for that hasn't been mentioned much here, and maybe it's a little early, but you did have the section by the art center, the performing arts center, having that open space. But I would like to see an area where it will be ever changing. It will be public displays of art. It could be sculptures that kids have done in class. It could be a garden. It could be something that is ever changing. And so that didn't really come up in this. It was just a lot of pretty trees and grass and sidewalks and a beautiful water area. But I would like to see a specific area that's going to be ever changing. And it could be, but I just didn't see that here.
So kind of a combination of indoor and outdoor space that works together but could be changed.
It could,
uses of
yeah.
art,
It could be
uses of-
quarterly. It could be a high school project. It could be given to the citizens where this is their place that they're always changing it. It's something that somebody will come every spring, summer, fall, and go, oh, what's new this time? So that's what I'd like to see.
And again, I think, not to push the alternative plan too much, but I hear you, and I think that we might have a better chance of doing that on the alternative plan because you've got a bit of a smaller area to work with.
Thank you.
I like the second plan, or alternative. It's creative. It's welcoming. I like the city hall brought forth to that corner. I like the idea that you might be able to pay for it easier with
Right.
more retail. I think to get practical.
It's always a plus.
Yeah, I think that's great because that's going to make it happen. Joanne said a lot of good things. I happen to like your architecture. I thought it was fresh. And I think your alternate design is something that we have not seen in the valley. And I know on the committee, we had lots of different city centers shown to us, and the square center was very common in many states. And so I think this adds a new and different element. I agree with our councilman as far as the exits on the city, on the council chambers. I think we need to take safety into consideration.
Let me say, I forgot to mention in my comments, the amount of private sector development numbers that we're showing, they're flexible, and they're flexible under either plan, but it's, we see a pretty good amount of office and a pretty good amount of residential, and a pretty good amount of retail, but they're flexible. Those numbers I put up there aren't in stone in terms of exactly how that mix is. And we do think that the way we pull this off with you will have a significant impact on the amount of retail we can attract here. Because office is one thing to attract office tenants because of the city hall, because of the grand place we're creating. Retail is, got to be very careful. So.
Right. Well, and it just, having worked on this so long, what I really was looking for is a civic quadrant that would wrap its arms around a citizen as they walk through those sidewalks. And I think this alternate design does that. I get a very comfortable feeling as I watch the presentation, and so I think that will happen with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm appreciative of what you brought to the council. I think both concepts are excellent. I lean toward the alternative one, basically in concert with what the councilmen to my left have indicated to you. I don't like to lose the view of the white tanks. However, we do have the Estrella Mountains to the southeast. Is there some way that we could open up the southeast corner with these the two retail buildings?
Could I say something there? Because I think there's a misnomer. We actually went on site, my husband with the compass, and we stood there And we did this for quite some time, and really, you are not going to get the vision that we see as we go down Estrella Parkway. It isn't that way when it gets designed. I think you remember that, Brett, don't you, when we, I don't know if you were here when we did that. So even if we did do that, I question whether or not on the first plan that you really would see the vision that you're thinking about is the same vision when we drive down that street.
you're not gonna see
Frank,
it.
do you remember that? I don't think it is.
Yes, you're
So
not gonna see it.
I think by the way it's designed now, you go into the city hall or on the other side of the city hall, you get a great vision of the white tanks. And then as you're at that corner on the street, you look straight ahead and you can see. But on that diagonal, it wasn't there. That's just a little input.
Councilman Souza, you were saying maybe at the corner of Australia, you were taking our private office buildings and
Maybe-
wanting to
Yeah,
bring them
if we
apart a
could get
little bit?
if we could get the view, and there's telling me we can't.
You're not going to get a view.
I don't know. I hit like heck to give what really are diamonds in the rough for us, and that's our mountains. The white tanks are there, and Western Australia.
Yeah.
And we're giving that up with your alternative proposal. But given that, I still think it's an excellent idea. Because there is retail in there, I think, and that's important to us, because the more retail we get, the less cost this is going to be to the city in the long run.
And the more invigorated this place becomes, I mean, the more active it is, which is, I think,
But, yeah, let's start building it. Please.
we're ready.
Councilmember Holland?
Well, I like the alternate plan too. I like the clean lines, so I guess the contemporary feel, clean lines, bright. It kind of gave a more open look to the whole concept, and I like that openness. So I think my other council members have kind of filled in a lot of the building concepts and things, but I would go with the clean lines and the bright concepts. And
Skylights and the
I
council
like that.
chambers.
I like it. Walking places. And whether or not you can see any mountains or not, I think we're always lucky in our community. We can see out of the windows, any windows that are given to us. So that was not really all that high on my list. Thank you. Thought it looked good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the alternate plan also. I think you've hit on something there. And I like the idea of the way you've designed the city hall, because there is an open space feeling with, and seeing the mountains, because you've got a lot of glass. And so the glass does open that up. Now, we don't know what will be constructed south and north, so those things might be covered up anyway. So if you want to see the mountains, I guess you get out in the street and look at the mountains, if that's a problem. I like the idea that you've covered up the arroyo, which I don't know why that arroyo was ever put in there, because it's not a natural arroyo for that area anyway. And
It was
I
a
like
pretty
that.
good design idea, though.
I know. To me, it was put like in the way of things, but I like this. I also like the idea that your parking is a part of the retail. I hope that's what you said. And so a lot of that will be built for us through your retail, along with your retail. Am I understanding that as?
Yeah, well, we're building our parking together with the office and retail pieces.
Right, okay. So that this all becomes usable then for both private and the municipal.
Sure.
And that's a very good thing. So, and I like the fact that it's more, it's cozy, it brings it all together. The other one was so open that's the reason I mentioned how many acres is that open space. That's huge. This brings it back together so that now we have things in a more feel better. I don't know how else to explain it, because it's something that works better, all the buildings and everything, and the people will come together, and it'll bring people together. So, and I like the idea too that we're going to have 24/7 almost with people being on site. You'll have less problems with graffiti, you'll have less problems with vandalism and anything else, because what you're designing here is something that will bring people here almost 24/7, almost. And add the universities to that. Now you've added that second phase, a second part of that, not in the phase, but a second part of that, which is going to also relate to the city center, because those university students don't sleep. They'll come out there and you'll need some all-night places for those students to come to. So I think that helps. All of that is a plus. And I just like the whole concept. And the architecture is, I think it's different. And I think that's another good thing, that it's unique. And I think that's a plus.
And we appreciate those comments and understand that we haven't had a chance to have this feedback, and we've shown you a lot of different styles of architecture. We selected that pretty much without a lot of feedback from you folks, and now we look forward to getting it.
And we've got the water there, so I assume we'll continue to have the water there if Sean says it's okay. And if we do have the water there, it's nice to have the big trees for shade, instead of having, well, of course, we've got a combination of both, artificial shade and the tree shade. So I like it. I like what you've done here.
Thank you.
And I think it's very compatible to the performing arts and everything, and the universities and everything else that'll be there.
Universities are exciting. They really are. We're very pleased and congratulate you guys on getting that deal done. That could add a whole dynamic that we're pretty excited about.
Well, that's going to make this go, too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, architecture for City Hall, I was somewhat in line with what Ms. Osborne said. It just was a little, on the first concept, it was just a little plain for me. I'm looking at your pictures. I'd almost like to see something a little closer to Austin and a little less Studio 15, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I mean, I think as architects you can kind of understand that. Something with a bit more articulation. Not that Studio 15 is bad. It's a great-looking building, but a little less box and a little bit more curvilinear or geometric type patterns going on with the architecture. Regarding, I mean, I don't know how anybody's going to argue with you in terms of your alternatives. I mean, I think your second alternative is more economically feasible for both parties, your interest and our interest. So it makes a lot of sense. Regarding the visual corridor, as you know, I'd like to see, when you're contemplating the lobby in City Hall, I'd like to see something that's event-worthy. So somewhere that we can, you know.
We talked about that.
Yeah, I know y'all have talked about it, but you walk in, the closest thing I can compare on this side of town is Avondale's City Hall. You walk in, there's kind of this event-worthy space. And not to say one's bad, one's good or bad. I think we can improve upon what we have in our neighbors' City Hall. But by maybe creating an event-worthy space that's 2 or 3 stories in height, you can open that up with glass and still protect your visual corridor, or at least allow for a potential visual corridor through City Hall.
Through the building. Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like to see you maybe contemplate that, and even to the extent that if I'm walking from that northwest corner of Estrella and Yuma, and I want to head all the way through there, I've got to now cut around City Hall if it's after hours. So just contemplate the pedestrian flow and the walkability through that from a major intersection. If I'm a bus rider eventually that's going up and down Estrella or Yuma, I'm going to get dropped at that corner. And if I want to walk through in the late hours, keep obviously the lighting, but the most direct path in mind. So if there's a way to cut through City Hall after hours that still has our security and that sort of thing, might be worthy. There was one one con for me a little bit on the alternative. The second alternative is that connectivity, that openness, but to the north. I saw that compress up there on the north end as you're looking towards the universities, and if we really are embracing them as partners, that was something I really liked about the first go, or the
It doesn't look like a gateway.
It just doesn't look like a gateway, to the university setting. It's you kind of you bottleneck through there.
Mm-hmm. Good point that we could probably deal with.
Yeah, I'd like to see that open up so that there's this. You have a secondary visual corridor through that whole area.
be interesting to know what that space is, how much that space is right there between the two
Connection,
buildings.
yeah, the
How
visual
much space
floor.
do you think there is between those two buildings?
Well, I look at the difference. I look at the university is this wide. You're walking through there, and then you come into the city center. It goes this, and then it comes back out. Versus one, consistent space. We're chopping it up.
You guys have an idea of how long, how wide that is
80 feet, 100. I mean,
in the alternative plan?
The base plan is about 200 feet across from
Oh, that's quite a bit.
The alternative is 100? So you're right, we
it's quite a big difference.
quite shrunk it.
And I remember when we had a conversation. I'm pretty sure it was here. We had talked about even having the pedestrians maybe go under, kind of like what you have at the Biltmore right now with the pedestrian underpass. That we had talked about separating the vehicular and the pedestrian traffic between the universities, and narrowing it doesn't really allow for that opportunity to occur. You're keeping everybody at the same level. So, and I got a comment on it because I saw it, but the glass cafe. The downtown courthouse was like the worst architectural disaster in Phoenix history in terms of energy efficiency. So if we're thinking cafe, even if it's a small little glass structure, let's not make it a greenhouse, because it doesn't matter what you do in July. You got a bunch of glass. It's going to be 125 degrees sitting inside. So got to say it now rather than have it built. But last question I got, maybe for you or for staff, but how long? I mean, this is really our first opportunity to look at this. How long between now and finalization that we're giving you feedback? I know I'm going to walk away with this, and we're all going to walk away with it and think of things as we're going. Are we looking at a deadline from staff in terms of giving feedback?
We're ready to meet with your staff.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, we've received some clear direction this evening. The next step is to proceed and I guess refine the plan based on the input that you provided, and also to put together a memorandum of understanding, to put together that business plan which would summarize the key points, and then get that back to you. And it will probably be around August by the time that happens, when we get that memo back to you.
But I think, Brett, that given your comments tonight, we can certainly get back to you before then with some feedback in terms of some of the planning process, so that we can tend to hone in on reaching those kind of agreements physically. We'd like to move, obviously, as fast as we can on the business end, but we can certainly get back to you regardless of that. That's right, we're on TV here. As I said, we can definitely get back to you between, I would say, what do you think, Andrew and Mark, 3 weeks, something like that, to respond to, and we haven't heard from the mayor yet, but to respond to their comments? However you guys want to do it, we're anxious to continue this
Sooner the
dialogue.
better.
Okay.
Been waiting a long time.
No, I'm done.
Okay, just a couple comments. I like both plans, quite candidly. I would be satisfied with either one. So, I do agree with Councilmember Osborne and the Vice Mayor that the City Hall, to me, is a little stark. It's a good word I thought you used there. But that's how it comes across to me. When I looked at the USD Shilley Science and Technology Center in San Diego, that type of architecture appeals to me. That's sort of more Romanesque than we want to be here, I guess. But I certainly like the pillars. And I like that sort of thing. But I'm not an architect. I just agreed that it didn't look warm to me the way it was presented. I do think we need to plan within our green area someplace to demonstrate our respect for those who serve. We need a place where people can meet on Memorial Day and we can have an event. It isn't exclusive of that, but it would be the place where we show our respect to those who served in war.
Absolutely.
And then
Oh,
I sort of see a dramatic shift in our plan. This was supposed to be a city center with 4 corners. And we were going to be the public area, another was going to have a hotel, and then the other corner was going to have office, and another corner was going to be residential, with mixtures. And I don't know if Sun MP has seen particularly your alternate plan, but they have 3 of those corners. And what you've done is you've placed within this one corner virtually everything that we need in the 4 corners. And we've got the hotel at the ball field. The convention center now is at the ball field, so we didn't need one in the northeast corner. You're moving a lot of residential into this corner. And, of course, you got retail and office in this corner, 10 stories high. And I like that. But I'm not sure that it doesn't add to what is the relevance of the other 3 corners in our future planning, because everything is being incorporated in the northwest corner.
So, Eric, join me up here, because you've been on these 4 corners longer than I have. But let me say, Mayor, that I appreciate your comment. I think we didn't really program that much retail. We're not sure how much retail works. I think the main uses are office, which we feel strongly about, and residential.
But we also have a lot of retail at the ballpark village, too.
Right.
So I'm not having any problem with that. It just is a dramatic shift for me.
I think, Mr. Mayor, what you're seeing is the evolution of the plan, to be sure. But we've had a lot of conversations about all the other activity, and of course down at Ballpark Village. But those 3 Sun NP parcels have been so important to the planning of this entire area. We don't want to cannibalize anything from happening. I think what you're seeing here is a vision from a team looking at this for the first time, talking about the opportunity. I hope what would happen is the office in this location would then be a catalyst for other office development. The residential in this location would be a catalyst for more residential development. A hotel down at the ball field shouldn't preclude us from putting a great hotel across Estrella. So if we want to...
Delays it, Eric, by a lot.
Well, okay. Well, I think we're talking... Our vision, though, is not tomorrow. It's not even 5 years. We're going to start immediately as soon as we can on some of the private development. But some of our private development in our phase happens 5-10 years down the road as well. So ultimately, we're talking about the opportunity that can be grand for all these parcels.
And it's ever evolving.
Yes.
And as we met in the committee and talked about this, that what we perceive for the future may not really end up at that time of that development, because it isn't going to be built overnight. And we did discuss from the very beginning to have something on that quadrant that made it self-sustainable. And it pays for it. So where I can understand some of your concerns, Mayor, I still think that it takes those different components at the time you're going to build this to keep it alive.
Yeah, and I don't have a negative on this.
Yeah.
What's happened though is I think the focus is changing, and Sun MP should have been on board, and they could have been on board. But what this does do is sort of interesting. It eliminates, or at least reduces significantly, the interaction among the 3 corners. The transportation problem of 6 lanes of traffic in each direction, having to cross that traffic to get to where the action is, because everybody's going to be in the one corner where the action is. So it's actually makes a lot more sense over the next 20 or 30 years for sure. It's almost easier to do, and we don't have to worry about the movement of people from one corner to the other and the delaying of traffic, because they aren't going to be affected as much if you're only in one corner with the majority of the action, and you're putting the action in that northwest corner.
Just 2 quick points. The uses in this corner have always been civic, and still it's predominantly civic, as you can see, but office and residential was always contemplated here. Mr. Mayor, I think Sun MP would look at this, and all developers, the entire Goodyear would look at this and say, wow, terrific. because the more density, the more opportunity. You're right, it might delay. There might be some competition with an office who gets it out of the ground first. And being next to City Hall is a big darn deal. But I think what you're seeing is then the increased value in all those parcels, the more development that we bring to the
I think
area.
it produces a challenge for them, and also an inspiration.
Yeah.
I think that goes beyond of what we as a council can think, because that's not our business, and we're not, that we're not futuristic in that. But I think that we're giving a challenge, and Sun MP did sit on the committee, and they did hear this conversation about office and retail, and keeping that quadrant alive and sustainable. And they also heard that it's ever evolving and it's going to take time. What we see here today is not going to be built within a few years. And the same way with the other quadrants. So it gives them the challenge of, and they too are going to come before us, I'm sure, with some changes and some desires of something new that's out there that we don't know about, that's going to make those other quadrants very sustainable. So why I know we had a certain fixed plan, but the consultant told us all along, don't get too married to this plan, because it's going to change. We as a city in the last 4 years, look what we've changed. We have put products where we didn't even think we were going to. We brought companies in, we had no idea we were going to put them there. So we need to be open, we need to be creative. And so I do agree with the mayor, we need to make sure we've got Sun MPs sitting with us all the time and talking to them. They deserve it. They sat 2 years with me on this committee, and so I respect them, and I certainly want them to be successful.
Well, and again, I appreciate that as well. I think one of the things that got us excited in the first place and continues to have our sincere interest is the idea of a city center. And, as you've seen, we've got a lot of experience. We see what the city is, what the public is willing to commit here is going to be such a catalyst to private development, which will not only accrete to us but to you. And that in turn, one of the things I've done in my whole career is really look for the most valuable properties to buy so that we can build the most valuable developments on those properties. And that, I can say that I look at this thing, if we together make this corner what we're talking about, it will improve the aspects and the values and the opportunities for the three corners, because it will be a start. It'll really be a center of the city that will engender other development.
What do you bet Sun MP tells me something entirely differently tomorrow? Because I'm going to be with them tomorrow.
That won't be the first time, because they said something entirely different during the whole time that we were there, and it took a long time to bring them to the table. So, all due respect, I think it's workable, really.
Yeah, I don't question its workability, and I'm not worried about Sun MP. I think this makes sense to me. But it is a change. It is definitely a change in the overall plan, because their property now, they have found it difficult how they're going to integrate with us in this corner. But there were certain things that they were going to have, and now we're taking some of those things and putting them in our corner. That's a fact. And I'm not arguing it. It's a change. It's a change. I'm not sure we any longer will have a four-corner city center. Certainly not in my lifetime. I'll say that. Anything else?
Mayor?
Yes.
Just one additional comment, and I hope I understood this correctly, and that was there really will not be a back to our city center. It's really two fronts. Is that correct? I like
City
that
Hall,
very much.
right.
Yeah, because there's no back to it. So you really have that entrance from the universities and from the libraries and everything just kind of coming right in through what we would normally refer to the back over the front.
And I also like the idea that the Vice Mayor mentioned of how do we able to walk through the City Hall, really, whatever hour of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. We'll try to schedule that as soon as you can with us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
How about if we go for 6:30? Is that all right?
Oh, sounds great.
Okay, this work session is adjourned.